Mark had never been the type to cause trouble. He kept his lawn trimmed, his lights dim, and his greetings polite. After inheriting the house from his grandfather, he'd quietly upgraded the place, solar panels, a vegetable garden, and now a sleek 8-foot privacy fence. Modern charcoal grey slats line the backyard edge like silent soldiers, blocking the view of the cracked community tennis courts. And, more importantly, blocking Karen. Karen, the self-declared unofficial president of the HOA, even though there was technically an actual board, had made it her personal mission to patrol the neighborhood for anything that deviated from the original 1993 HOA handbook, including mailbox paint, including Halloween decorations, and now fences. Mark had barely finished the last panel when her voice sliced through the warm afternoon. "Excuse me?" she shrieked from across the street, marching with her phone raised like it was a sword. "What is this monstrosity?" Mark wiped his brow and turned slowly. "My fence. You can't just build that without consulting the HOA. It's not harmonious with the neighborhood." "It's within regulation," he replied calmly. 6 feet in front, 8 in the back. Approved by city zoning. I double-checked. Karen's eyes narrowed. "Well, the HOA has final say. That fence is an eyesore, and you're blocking my sunlight." Mark blinked. "Your sunlight? Have potted succulents on my upstairs balcony," she snapped, as if that explained everything. Rather than argue, Mark simply walked back inside. But as the door closed behind him, he caught a glimpse of her, already typing furiously on her phone, pacing the sidewalk like a general, planning her next move. That evening, Mark found it, taped to his front door, a bright yellow notice with the HOA's emblem, though it looked like it had been printed at home. The letter cited unauthorized structural modifications, demanded removal of the fence within 10 days, and was signed by Acting HOA President Karen Whitmore. There was no official HOA letterhead, no board signatures, no proof of vote. Mark chuckled. "Of course," he muttered, tossing it on the counter. But as the days passed, things got weirder. He caught Karen snapping photos from her driveway, always trying to look like she was just checking her mail. Then came the sudden wellness checks from other HOA members who hadn't spoken to him in years. One neighbor even asked, "Is it true your fence is made of toxic treated wood?" "Only if you're planning to lick it," Mark deadpanned. Still, something about the way Karen moved, like she was building momentum, put him on edge. He'd seen her take down a kid's treehouse last summer, made a war veteran repaint his American flag mailbox beige. If she had a grudge, she never let go. Mark installed a motion-sensitive camera above the back fence, just in case. Then, one night, as he was reviewing the footage, he saw her, Karen, in a hoodie, stepping past the fence line with a tape measure in one hand and a flashlight in the other. She scribbled something into a notepad, stared up at his bedroom window, then vanished back into the shadows. That was when Mark knew. This wasn't about fences. This was about control. She didn't just want compliance. She wanted obedience, and she had no idea who she was dealing with. Mark had expected Karen to retaliate, but not like this. It started with the blinking light. One night, as Mark watered his pepper plants near the fence, he noticed a tiny red glow, pulsing from Karen's upstairs window. It wasn't a lamp. It wasn't a candle. It was a recording light, pointed directly at his backyard. He stared at it for a long second, then waved casually. The light didn't blink off. The next morning, he woke to find a crumpled bag of mulch tossed over the fence and into his garden bed. Petty. He checked the footage. Sure enough, 2:17 a.m. Karen had crept out in her fuzzy pink slippers, flung the bag over, and scurried back like a cartoon villain. She glanced at the camera once, saw the tiny blue light, and flipped it off before disappearing into the shadows. Charming, Mark muttered. By the third day, he'd counted 3 HOA notices from various concerned neighbors about his fence being intimidating, inappropriate, and a psychological barrier that promotes division. One letter was written in glitter pen. Karen was clearly campaigning. But things took a darker turn when Mark opened his mailbox one morning to find a rolled-up flyer inside. It read, "Community Safety Alert. Surveillance in use. Buy property name Elmwood 187. Possible privacy violations. Proceed with caution." Underneath, a low-res printout of his security camera footage. Zoomed in, time-stamped, with the words, "Is this legal?" scrawled below in red ink. Mark felt his stomach tighten. Karen was trying to turn the neighborhood against him. She'd taken footage from his property, from his security system, and was now using it to accuse him of spying. He walked the block that evening, casually talking to a few neighbors. Most were polite, some awkward, a few sheepish. It was clear Karen had been planting seeds of paranoia. One older man even whispered, "She said you had drones." Mark nearly laughed, until he realized the man was serious. But then came the final straw. At 5:03 a.m. on Thursday morning, Mark's phone buzzed with a motion alert. Someone was in his backyard. He pulled up the live feed and froze. Karen. This time, she wasn't just measuring. She was pacing, slow and careful, holding a laser pointer in one hand and a clipboard in the other. She scanned the top of the fence, took photos, then angled a small level against the wooden panels, like she was conducting an official inspection. Mark hit record on the app and watched in disbelief. Then, she walked up to the side of this house, leaned in, and tried to open his gate. It was locked. She rattled it once, looked up toward the camera again, eyes narrowing, and then vanished back into the alley. When the sun rose, Mark printed out a high-resolution still of her in, mid-creep, and stuck it to the inside of his glass storm door. That evening, as he sat on the porch with a glass of sweet tea, Karen walked by, as always, clutching a clipboard like a shield. She paused, saw the photo, blanched. Mark raised his glass. Smile for the next one. She didn't say a word, just stormed off in a whirl of floral polyester and righteous indignation. But something told Mark she wasn't finished. She was the type to strike when things were quietest, and in this neighborhood, silence was the loudest warning of all. It happened on a Sunday night, the kind of night where nothing should go wrong. Mark had just settled onto the couch with a bowl of popcorn and an old noir flick playing on low volume. The hum of his air purifier and the occasional cricket outside made it feel peaceful, safe, until the world turned red and blue. Flashing lights bled through the blinds like an emergency strobe. A cruiser rolled to a stop outside his driveway. A second followed, lights flaring, then the knock, sharp, official, and heavy. 3 raps that made his stomach twist. Mark opened the door slowly. 2 uniformed officers stood on his porch, one resting a hand near his holster. "Mr. Mark Ellison?" "Yes. We received a report of unauthorized construction and potential trespass onto HOA land. Mind if we have a quick look around?" Mark blinked. "You're here because of a fence? It was called in as a safety hazard and possible violation of city boundaries." Behind them, Karen stood on the sidewalk, arms folded, phone aimed like a camera. Her smug smirk practically radiated from across the street. Mark stepped outside. Officers, I'm happy to show you the permits. I filed everything through zoning, met the height and setback codes, and it's all on my private property. I even had a surveyor confirm the lot lines. The younger officer, a red-headed man with a tight jaw, nodded. Mind showing us where the fence meets the side property line? Of course. Mark led them through the gate and into the backyard. He pulled out a copy of the permit packet from a small waterproof lockbox he kept near the tool shed. Everything's here. The land has been in my family since 1981. My grandfather subdivided it, but retained the main lot, this one, and leased the surrounding land to a property company. The second officer glanced at the papers, his brow furrowing. So you own this entire plot, not just the plot. I believe I own a bit more than Karen realizes. He said it calmly, but let the words linger. The officers exchanged a look. Everything appears to be in order. The older one said, "You're not in violation of anything we can see. Just know that if this continues, you can file a harassment complaint." Mark nodded. But before the officers could leave, Karen shouted from the sidewalk, "That man is hiding utilities. That fence might be covering illegal drainage lines." The younger officer suppressed a sigh. "Ma'am, we've reviewed the property and permits. There's no crime here. But he's violating HOA aesthetics. The fence isn't even painted to match. That's a civil matter, not a criminal one." Karen's voice pitched higher. "He's creating a hostile environment. I feel targeted in my own neighborhood." Mark turned to face her, stepping forward with slow confidence. "Karen, you set foot on my property at 5:03 a.m. last Thursday. You attempted to open my gate. I have high-resolution video. You should tread carefully when accusing others of hostility." For a split second, she looked pale. Then her face snapped into its usual mask of indignation. "This isn't over. The community has rights." Mark watched as she stomped back across the street, muttering to herself, her phone still recording. The officers tipped their hats and left. The flashing lights disappeared down the road. Mark stood alone in the quiet. But something had shifted. Karen had just played her biggest card, law enforcement, and it had failed. And that meant only one thing. She was running out of moves. He walked back inside, pulled out his laptop, and logged into the county registrar's online records. It was time to remind himself exactly what he owned, and maybe, just maybe, uncover what she didn't. Mark hadn't looked through his grandfather's files in years. The boxes were stacked neatly in the attic, dusty, labeled in faded Sharpie, and untouched since the funeral. But after Karen's stunt with the police, he figured it was time to dig. He brought down 3 boxes. One was marked HOA correspondence, 1990s. That made him chuckle. His grandfather had always called the HOA a tin pot regime in beige khakis. But the real treasure came from a file labeled Land Use, Elmwood Subdivision. Inside were yellowing maps, photocopies of city zoning laws, and finally, a deed addendum. Mark leaned forward as his eyes scanned the paper. Parcel 18A, including surface and subsurface rights to surrounding 0.25-acre tract, held in ownership by Harold Ellison with lease rights granted to Fairway Residential Rentals, LLC. His heart picked up speed. Parcel 18A was his home. The surrounding tract, Karen's lot, had been carved out and leased, but not sold. It was still listed as private land, held under trust. In legal terms, Mark wasn't just her neighbor, was her landlord. He looked up the leaseholder, Fairway Residential Rentals, LLC. A quick search showed they still held the master lease. His grandfather had set it up decades ago, likely to generate income without giving up control. Karen wasn't a homeowner. She was renting from a rental company that was leasing land they didn't technically own. Mark sat back in stunned silence. No wonder she never talked about a mortgage. No wonder she always overcompensated at HOA meetings. She wasn't even a full member. She had renter status. And if she'd read her lease, she'd know the agreement clearly stated, lease may be terminated for sustained nuisance behavior or violation of community harmony at owner's discretion. Mark grinned. He had her. But rather than confront her, he made a decision. One that made his pulse tingle with anticipation. He would not warn her. He would not tip her off. He would let her continue to build her paper tower of complaints and ego until it collapsed on its own. First, he called Fairway's regional office and asked to speak with the property manager on record. A polite man named Roger picked up. I believe I'm the landowner for a parcel you lease at 208 Elmwood. Mark said, you're renting to a Karen Whitmore. There was a pause. Yes, she's been active, let's say. We've had multiple complaints from neighboring addresses. I'd like to discuss exercising my termination clause, Mark said calmly. Due to repeated nuisance behavior, trespassing, and now false police reports. Roger didn't even hesitate. We'll need documentation, but if you've got it, we'll honor the terms. Mark emailed over the security footage, the police incident report, and scans of the old deed and lease agreement. All by sunset, Roger replied within the hour. Received. Will initiate review and process accordingly. It was happening. He sat on his porch that night, staring across the street at Karen's house. Her curtains were drawn, but he saw the flicker of a television. Probably a crime drama where the antagonist always got away. Not this time. He didn't feel vengeful. He felt justified. All her smug HOA notices, the surveillance, the cops, the harassment, all done under the false belief that she held power, when in truth, she was standing on land she didn't even own, and the owner was done being silent. The envelope wasn't flashy. No red stamps, no shouting headlines. Just a simple white letter slid into Karen's mailbox on a quiet Wednesday morning. She didn't even notice at first. Mark watched from his porch, coffee in hand, as she bustled, outside in her oversized sun visor, snapping at a pair of teenage boys riding scooters down the sidewalk. Only after her morning patrol did she flip through her mail and freeze at the unfamiliar envelope. She glanced around, her eyes grazing over Mark for half a second, and then disappeared inside. He waited. 2 minutes later, the front door slammed open. You petty little snake! Mark raised his eyebrows. Good morning to you two. Karen stormed across the street, waving the notice like it was dipped in acid. What is this supposed to be? Some kind of joke? No joke, Mark replied, calmly. That's a formal lease termination, delivered by Fairway Rentals, at the request of the property owner. You have 30 days to vacate. You're the property owner. Mark just smiled. Karen's mouth opened and closed, like she was trying to form words in a language she'd never learned. That's impossible. I've lived here for 11 years. I pay rent to a leasing company that rents the structure, but the land, the ground your precious HOA clipboard marches on, that's mine. Been in my family for decades. Karen's hand dropped to her side. This is a trick. You forged something. Actually, I sent Fairway everything. Surveys, deeds, video evidence of you trespassing, harassment, and even the cops showing up. They were more than willing to expedite the process. You've got quite the file over there. Her voice trembled. Now, thinner than usual. You can't do this. The HOA won't allow it. The HOA, Mark said, stepping down from his porch, doesn't get a say in private lease agreements. And since you're a renter, you're technically not a voting HOA member. Funny how that works. Karen looked like she might explode. Instead, She spun around and stormed off toward her house. But halfway up her driveway, she stopped and shouted over her shoulder, "I'll fight this. You hear me? I'll take it to court." Mark shrugged. "Go ahead. But I hope your lease lawyer is better than your fence measuring skills." The next day, a new HOA notice appeared. One Karen printed herself. It was stapled to the community. Board near the mailbox cluster. Urgent. An outside party is attempting to undermine HOA authority and remove long-standing members. A special emergency meeting will be held at my residence Thursday evening. HOA unity is more important than ever, Mark almost laughed. It was desperate, transparent, and meaningless. The real kicker came that afternoon, when Roger from Fairway called. "Hey Mark, just a heads up. Ms. Whitmore tried to claim you forged the deed. We forwarded her a digital copy from the county registry. She got quiet after that. Thanks, Roger. Oh, and she tried to say the fence made her feel emotionally unsafe. Did you tell her it was legal, city permitted, measured, and not going anywhere?" She hung up mid-sentence. That night, Mark baked a loaf of banana bread and brought it to his next-door neighbors, the Tanners. He explained everything, calmly, without drama. By the end, they were both laughing. "You mean Karen's been bossing us around all these years, and she doesn't even own her house?" Mrs. Tanner wheezed. "Afraid so." "Well," Mr. Tanner said, "it's about time someone knocked her off her throne." Mark smiled. 30 days, then it's done. But deep down, he knew Karen wasn't the type to go quietly. And her next move? It might be her most dangerous yet. The emergency HOA meeting was set for 6:30 p.m. sharp, but Karen's porch was lit up like a political rally by 5:45. Lawn chairs were lined in tight rows, citronella candles flickered, and a folding table held lukewarm lemonade beside a tray of misshapen cookies. A laminated sign read, "Defend our community. Stop property overreach." Mark watched from across the street, arms folded. Neighbors trickled in. Some looked confused, others curious. A few just came for the cookies. By 6:35, Karen stood in front of her modest crowd, about 12 people, half of whom Mark knew were renters with zero HOA voting power. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice charged with theatrical sincerity. "As you've heard, an individual in this neighborhood has begun targeting residents through legal loopholes, attempting to disrupt our peaceful way of life by claiming ownership over land that does not belong to them." There were murmurs. Mark could hear every word through the open windows. This same individual erected a fence without HOA-style approval. Then, in an act of revenge, he orchestrated the removal of one of our longest-standing residents, me. Mark shook his head. "She was spinning it fast and hard. But we have rights. I have contacted a lawyer. And let me be clear, this is not just a personal attack. It's an assault on the entire HOA system. If we don't push back, what's to stop this so-called landowner from evicting anyone he disagrees with? What's to stop him from controlling our bylaws? From dissolving the HOA altogether?" That last part actually got gasps. Karen saw her opening and went for it. "I'm calling for a community vote to censure Mark Ellison and recommend a full review of his property claims under Elmwood Association Rule 14B, Preservation of Neighborhood Character and Unity." Mark stepped outside and began walking toward the sidewalk. Karen saw him and raised her voice. "Don't let one man, one fence, divide this neighborhood. Stand with your community." The applause was half-hearted. A few people clapped, mostly unsure of why. Mark waited until the noise died down, then spoke evenly. "Two things," he said. 1. Rule 14B applies to HOA members. You're not one. You rent, you don't get a vote. Neither do half the people here. There was an awkward silence. 2. I own this land. Not the structure you live in. That belongs to Fairway Rentals. But the soil beneath your home, the lines under your bushes, the roots of your favorite lawn flamingo. I own it all. He stepped onto her grass. Karen flinched. I am the legal landowner, with county records and historical deeds to prove it. And I have exercised my right to terminate the lease due to your documented harassment, trespassing, and false police reports. You have 27 days left. Karen looked around. No one met her eyes. Mr. Tanner raised a cautious hand. Karen, is this true? She didn't answer. Karen, I've lived here for over a decade, she snapped. I've served this HOA, upheld the rules, organized events. That's not the question, Mrs. Tanner said quietly. Is it true you don't own your home? Karen's lips trembled. Mark watched it happen in real time, the unraveling. She grabbed the pitcher of lemonade and hurled it at Mark's feet. It splashed harmlessly on the sidewalk. You think this is over? She shouted. You don't know what I'm capable of. Mark's eyes narrowed. No, I don't. She stormed back inside, slamming the door behind her. The crowd dispersed. In stunned silence, Mark stood alone, the sticky lemonade trickling toward the curb, and for the first time, he wasn't sure what Karen would do next, but something told him she wasn't done. Not yet. 3 days passed in silence. Mark expected retaliation. He double-checked the fence, installed motion-triggered cameras, even set up alerts with his home security system, but Karen's house remained suspiciously quiet. No HOA flyers, no porch, rants, no barking at kids. That was the most unnerving part, the calm. Then came Friday morning. Mark opened his mailbox to find a letter with an official-looking seal. County Code Enforcement Division. He unfolded it slowly. His stomach tightened. Notice of investigation. You are hereby notified of a pending inspection regarding unpermitted construction, potential code violations, and unauthorized land alterations. This investigation is in response to anonymous community complaints. Mark stared at the paper. Unpermitted construction. What construction? Unless, he turned to look at his fence. Karen. It had to be Karen. She couldn't stop the eviction, couldn't win over the neighbors. So now she was playing her last hand. Government bureaucracy. By 11:01 a.m., a white county vehicle pulled up. A code enforcement officer stepped out, clipboard in hand. Mark greeted him politely. Sorry about the inconvenience. The officer said, We're just following up on several complaints. Someone reported zoning violations, property line, encroachments, even damage to protected foliage. Mark blinked. Protected foliage. I trimmed a rose bush. The officer gave a tired chuckle. Welcome to HOA territory. They walked the perimeter together. Mark showed him the permits for the fence, the land deed, even the camera footage, showing Karen trying to dig on his side of the yard weeks ago. The officer took notes. She also claimed you erected an outbuilding and poured illegal concrete near a storm drain. That's news to me. The officer scanned the property. No concrete, no outbuilding. Just a man with a fence and a target on his back. By the end of the visit, the officer handed back the paperwork. Looks clean to me. I'll file it as resolved. Mark nodded. Mind if I ask who filed the complaint? I can't say officially, the officer said, then added with a wink. But I've seen a name before. As the county truck pulled away, Mark's phone buzzed. A text from Roger at Fairway Rentals. Heads up. Karen requested emergency lease protection, citing landowner harassment. Denied it. Our legal team is rock solid. Still, she's kicking up dust. Mark typed back. She's stalling. She knows time's almost up. Let us know if she escalates. Our lawyers are ready. That night, around 2:09 a.m., Mark's motion alert chimed. He checked the feed from his porch camera. A shadow moved along the property line, slinking in a crouch. Flashlight off. Karen. She tiptoed up to the fence, pulled something from her hoodie, and began spraying. Mark squinted at the screen. Spray paint. By morning, Mark found the full message in dripping red letters. Trespasser. Thief. Fraud. He sighed, took pictures, and filed a police report for vandalism. But what really stopped him cold wasn't the paint. It was what he found shoved in his mailbox. Unaddressed and unsigned. I'm not leaving. You think you're smart, but you're just a guy with a fence. This neighborhood belongs to me. No envelope, just the note. Written in blocky, manic script. She was unraveling. Fast. He tightened security, bought brighter motion lights, and started documenting everything. The countdown was now 22 days, and Karen was spiraling towards something irrational, possibly dangerous, as the sun set behind the rooftops of Elmwood. Mark sat on his porch, eyes scanning her dark windows. She wasn't done, and when she finally snapped, he had a feeling it would be big. Too big to undo. The 22nd day dawned with thick fog blanketing Elmwood. Mark felt the weight of the looming deadline, like a storm pressing against his chest. Karen's vandalism had rattled the neighborhood, and whispers rippled through the block like wildfire. But Mark kept his calm. He had legal backing, community support, and one last card up his sleeve. That morning, as Karen's eviction clock ticked mercilessly forward, a delivery truck rolled into her driveway. Mark had arranged it discreetly. A licensed surveyor and a city official, arriving to confirm property boundaries and ownership records in person. Karen was nowhere to be seen. The surveyor began walking the property lines, measuring, consulting his documents. The city official confirmed land deeds and zoning codes. Mark watched from his porch, tense but resolute. At noon, the official turned to Mark with a small smile. Everything's in order. The land belongs to you, Mr. Ellison. The lease termination is valid. Fairway Rentals has full authority. Mark nodded, grateful. Thank you. But just as the city official was packing up, a police cruiser rolled down the street. Officers got out, their faces grave. Sir, one said, we received an emergency call from your neighbor's address. She claims she's been threatened and that someone broke into her house last night. Mark's heart sank. Inside Karen's house, the scene was chaotic. The police found overturned furniture, shattered glass, and the unmistakable scent of smoke. Karen was sitting on her couch, clutching her phone, her eyes wild. He did it, she sobbed. Mark broke in. He's trying to ruin me. The officers exchanged looks. Mark wasn't on the property, hadn't been near it since dawn. The security cameras told the true story. Karen had set the fire herself. A desperate bid to claim victimhood. When Mark was brought in for questioning, he handed over every scrap of evidence, security footage, photos of vandalism, text messages, the legal deed. Slowly the truth surfaced. Karen's plan had been to destroy her own house, frame Mark for arson, and delay eviction through legal chaos, but it backfired. The fire department confirmed the blaze was caused by an accelerant found inside Karen's home. Police charged her with insurance fraud, arson, and filing false reports. The HOA watched from the sidelines, shocked but relieved. The neighborhood that once quaked under Karen's relentless grip could finally breathe. In the quiet weeks that followed, Mark worked with Fairway Rentals to transfer ownership rights more transparently. The neighborhood restored trust, and the HOA held a community picnic where Mark was invited, not as an adversary, but as a neighbor. As for Karen, she faced the consequences of her choices. But perhaps the most haunting part was her final voicemail to Mark before leaving Elmwood. You think you won, but this neighborhood will never be yours. You just don't know it yet. Mark listened, then deleted the message. He looked out over the freshly mowed lawns, the peaceful streets bathed in golden light, and smiled. Sometimes owning the land isn't just about property lines or legal papers. It's about standing your ground. And in Elmwood, that was exactly what Mark Ellison had done.